Lisa pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Auto Gallery just after 9 in the morning. She'd dropped her 2 kids off at school and figured she had a couple hours before her volunteer shift at the community center. Her husband David had been telling her for weeks to go pick out a new car, something reliable for all the running around she did. But Lisa wasn't picky. She just needed something dependable that got good gas mileage. She stepped out of her 8-year-old sedan and looked down at what she was wearing. Jeans, a comfortable sweater, and her favorite sneakers. Nothing fancy but clean and neat. She grabbed her purse and headed toward the gleaming showroom, its floor-to-ceiling windows displaying luxury vehicles that sparkled under the bright lights. The moment she walked through the automatic doors, she felt it. That feeling when you enter a fancy store and suddenly become invisible. The showroom was massive, with polished marble floors that reflected the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Classical music played softly in the background. Several salespeople in crisp suits stood around, but none of them looked her way. Lisa walked slowly past a sleek black sedan, admiring its curves. She peeked through the window at the interior, impressed by the leather seats. A young couple dressed in business attire entered behind her, and immediately 2 salespeople rushed over to greet them, offering coffee and asking what brought them in today. She waited, thinking someone would come help her next. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Lisa moved to another section of the showroom where the more affordable models were displayed. She opened the door of a silver sedan and sat in the driver's seat, getting a feel for it. The car smelled new, that distinct scent of fresh leather and plastic. She adjusted the mirrors and checked out all the features. "Can I help you?" A sharp voice broke her concentration. Lisa looked up to see a salesman in his 30s, slicked back hair and a name tag that read, Brandon. But his tone wasn't helpful. It was suspicious, like he'd caught her doing something wrong. "Yes, actually," Lisa said with a smile, stepping out of the car. "I'm looking to buy a sedan. Something good on gas, reliable. This one seems nice." Brandon looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her casual clothes and well-worn sneakers. "Uh-huh, and what's your budget?" "I haven't really set one yet. My husband said to find something I like and—" "Look, ma'am," Brandon interrupted, glancing at his watch. "These vehicles start at $45,000. That's before taxes and fees. We're talking serious money here." Lisa felt her cheeks flush. "I understand that. I'm interested in learning more about— Have you checked your credit score recently?" Brandon crossed his arms. "Because financing on these isn't exactly easy to get. You need excellent credit, substantial down payment, proof of income." "I'm not worried about financing," Lisa said, her voice quieter now. A few other customers had started to glance over. "I just want to know about the car's features and maybe take a test drive." Brandon let out a long sigh, the kind you make when someone is wasting your time. "A test drive? We don't just let anyone take these cars out. You need to be pre-approved first. Have you even looked at our website? Done any research?" Another salesman wandered over, an older guy named Todd according to his badge. "Everything okay here, Brandon?" "Yeah, just explaining our policies," Brandon said. Todd looked at Lisa with the same dismissive expression. "Ma'am, I think what my colleague is trying to say is that we cater to a specific clientele here," Todd said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "These are luxury vehicles. Premium automobiles. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of the used car lots on the east side. They've got some great deals on pre-owned vehicles." Lisa felt her heart sink. She'd been judged, evaluated, and found wanting, all because of what she was wearing. "I'm not looking for a used car. I came here specifically because my husband recommended this dealership." Brandon and Todd exchanged glances. Brandon actually chuckled. "Your husband recommended us? What's he drive?" The question felt like a trap, but Lisa answered anyway. "He doesn't really— He mostly uses a car service for work." "A car service," Todd repeated, nodding slowly like he'd just confirmed his suspicions. "Right. Look, miss, we're pretty busy today. We've got actual appointments. People who've already been pre-qualified. I don't think we can help you. I've been waiting for 20 minutes and no one's busy," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. She hated confrontation, but this was getting ridiculous. "I'm a potential customer. I have money to spend. Why are you treating me like this?" "We're not treating you anyway," Brandon said, his voice hardening. "We're just being realistic. This is a high-end dealership. We work with serious buyers who understand the value of these automobiles, not people who just wander in off the street in their gym clothes." "These aren't gym clothes," Lisa said, looking down at her outfit. "And even if they were, what difference does that make? By now, several other customers and salespeople had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Lisa felt every eye on her, felt the heat rising in her face. This was humiliating. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Todd said firmly. "You're creating a disturbance and we have other customers to attend to." "A disturbance? I'm just trying to buy a car." "You're raising your voice and making other customers uncomfortable," Brandon added. "Please leave or we'll have to call security." Lisa couldn't believe what was happening. She looked around at the other people in the showroom. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others watched with curiosity. No one spoke up for her. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll leave." She turned and walked toward the exit, her legs feeling shaky. Todd actually followed her to make sure she left, standing by the door as she pushed through it. The morning sun hit her face as she stepped outside, and she realized her eyes were wet. Lisa made it to her car and sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it tight. She'd been treated like she was nothing, like she didn't matter, like she was trying to scam them or waste their time, all because she'd dressed comfortably for a Tuesday morning errand. She pulled out her phone and texted David. "Went to Prestige Auto Gallery like you suggested. They kicked me out, said I couldn't afford anything there, made me leave in front of everyone. I feel awful." She sat there for a long moment watching people come and go from the dealership. Well-dressed people who were greeted with smiles and handshakes. People who belonged. Lisa had never been one to flaunt anything. Even though David had done incredibly well for himself over the years, she'd stayed grounded. She volunteered, she raised their kids, she lived a normal life. She didn't need designer clothes or flashy jewelry to feel good about herself. But today, in that showroom, she'd felt small, invisible, unworthy. She started her old car and drove away, leaving Prestige Auto Gallery in her rearview mirror. She had no idea that tomorrow everything would change, that the men who'd humiliated her would learn exactly who they'd just dismissed, that her quiet, unassuming life was about to collide with theirs in a way none of them could imagine. For now, though, she just wanted to go home and forget this morning ever happened. David Chen was in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed. He normally kept it on silent during meetings, but he always had alerts on for messages from Lisa and the kids. You never knew when a real emergency might happen. He glanced down and saw Lisa's text. Then he read it again, slower this time, his jaw tightened. The other executives around the conference table continued their presentation about market projections, but David wasn't listening anymore. He was reading his wife's words over and over, feeling anger build in his chest with each pass. "Excuse me," he said, standing up. "I need to take this. Continue without me, please." He stepped out into the hallway of Chen Industries headquarters, the building he'd built from nothing over 15 years. His assistant, Patricia, looked up from her desk with concern. "Everything okay, Mr. Chen?" "Give me a few minutes," he said, dialing Lisa's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, hi, what happened?" David asked, keeping his voice calm even though he felt anything but calm inside. Lisa let out a shaky breath. "It's not a big deal. I'm fine." "Sweetheart, you texted me that they kicked you out of a car dealership. Tell me exactly what happened." So she did. The whole story came out. How she'd been ignored when she first walked in. How the salesman had looked at her like she was trying to pull a scam. How they'd questioned her credit, her budget, her right to even be there. How they'd actually escorted her out, making sure she left. "They made me feel like I was nothing," Lisa said, and David could hear the hurt in her voice. Like I was bothering them just by existing in their space. David closed his eyes. This was the woman who'd supported him when he was coding software in their tiny apartment, living on dollar store pasta and big dreams. The woman who'd believed in him when investors laughed at his pitches, who'd held their newborn daughter while he worked 18-hour days to get his first contract, who'd never once asked for luxury or status even when they could afford anything. Lisa was the most genuine person he knew. She volunteered at 3 different organizations. She knew the names of every person who worked in their building, from the CEO down to the night janitor. She'd rather spend a Saturday helping at a food bank than shopping on Fifth Avenue, and she'd been humiliated for wearing comfortable clothes to buy a car. "Which dealership?" he asked. "David, no, I don't want to make a big thing out of this." "Which dealership, Lisa?" She sighed. "Prestige Auto Gallery, the one you mentioned last month. You said they had good service," David remembered. He'd bought a car there years ago for his assistant, back when the old owner ran it. Apparently things had changed. What were the salesmen's names? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Brandon and Todd. Look, I just want to forget it happened. I'll go somewhere else. You shouldn't have to go somewhere else, David said. You did nothing wrong. They judged you before you even spoke. That's not okay. It happens, Lisa said quietly. People make assumptions based on appearances. It's life, it's discrimination, and it's wrong. David was pacing now, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. You're not just anyone, Lisa, you're my wife. You're a person who deserves basic respect. Every customer does. I know you want to fix this, but please don't make a big scene. I'm already embarrassed enough. David stopped pacing. He understood her hesitation. Lisa had always avoided the spotlight. She'd turned down interviews, refused to let her name be attached to his business ventures, kept their personal life intensely private. She didn't want to be known as the billionaire's wife. She just wanted to be Lisa. But this wasn't about making a scene. This was about principle. I'm not going to embarrass you, he promised, but I am going to handle this. Trust me? There was a pause. Always. After they hung up, David stood in the hallway for a long moment thinking. Then he went back to his office and made a call to his head of security. Michael, I need information on a business. Prestige Auto Gallery. Ownership, management, any complaints filed against them, everything you can find. I need it by end of day. On it, Michael replied without asking questions. He'd worked for David long enough to know that when the boss used that tone, it was important. Next, David called his attorney, Robert Hayes. Robert, hypothetical question. If a business discriminates against a customer based on appearance, what's the legal recourse? Depends on the specifics, Robert said. If it's a protected class issue, that's serious. Gender, race, religion. But even without that, businesses can face consequences for discriminatory practices. Civil suits, regulatory complaints, public relations nightmares. Why, what happened? David explained the situation. Robert listened without interrupting. That's messed up, Robert said when David finished. You want to sue them? I want options. Get me everything. And Robert? Keep it quiet for now. His last call was to Patricia. Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. And contact the garage. I'll need the Rolls-Royce detailed and ready by 8 a.m. Patricia, who'd been with him for 7 years, knew better than to question the request. Done. Anything else? Yes. Find out everything you can about Prestige Auto Gallery's sales practices. Online reviews, social media, anywhere customers might have complained. I want to know if this is a pattern. That evening, David came home earlier than usual. Lisa was helping their daughter with homework at the kitchen table, while their son played video games in the living room. Normal, everyday life. The kind of life Lisa loved. The kind she'd fought to maintain despite their wealth. Dad, their son called out. Want to play? In a bit, buddy, David said, kissing Lisa on the cheek. Can we talk? They went out to the back patio. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself against the cool evening air. I'm going back there tomorrow, David said. To the dealership. David, I'm not going to make a scene, he assured her. But I am going to make sure they understand what they did. Not because of who I am. Because of who you are. Because you deserved better. Lisa looked at him for a long moment. This really bothers you, doesn't it? It bothers me that my wife was treated like garbage for wearing jeans. It bothers me that those men looked at you and decided you weren't worth their time. It bothers me because I know if you'd walked in wearing diamonds and designer clothes, they would have fallen all over themselves to help you. And that's wrong. So what are you going to do? I'm going to give them an opportunity to make it right. And if they don't, he shrugged. Then I'll decide what comes next. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, David received the reports he'd requested. Michael had been thorough. Prestige Auto Gallery was owned by a guy named Robert Fletcher, who'd bought it 3 years ago. Sales had been decent, but there were complaints. 7 in the past year alone, all following a similar pattern. Customers who didn't look wealthy being treated poorly, ignored or asked to leave. One review stood out. I'm a lawyer. I make 6 figures. I went in wearing casual clothes on my day off and was treated like a criminal. Went back in a suit the next week and suddenly I was their best friend. This place judges people based on appearance, not character. Another. Took my elderly mother here to help her buy a car. The salesman kept talking to me instead of her, like she couldn't understand. When she tried to ask questions, he literally cut her off. Disgusting behavior. David read through them all. This wasn't about Lisa specifically. This was about a culture, a mindset that valued appearance over substance, that treated people as dollar signs instead of human beings. He opened his laptop and started typing an email to Robert Fletcher, the owner. Then he deleted it. This conversation needed to happen face to face. At 11 p.m., his phone rang. It was Robert Hayes, his attorney. "I did some digging," Robert said. "Prestige Auto Gallery has been sued twice in the past 2 years. Both cases settled quietly. One was a woman who claimed gender discrimination. Another was racial profiling. Neither made the news because Fletcher paid them off and had them sign NDAs. So this is definitely a pattern." "Absolutely. And if you decide to take action, you'd have a strong case. But David, think carefully about what you want here. Do you want revenge, justice, change? Those are 3 different things." David looked through the window at Lisa, who was reading a book on the couch. She looked peaceful now, back in her element, but he remembered the hurt in her voice that afternoon. "I want her to know she matters," David said. "I want those men to understand what they did. And I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." "That's the right answer," Robert said. "I'll be ready for whatever you need." After hanging up, David went and sat next to Lisa on the couch. She put her book down and leaned against him. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "I really am." "Okay," she said simply. "Then I'm coming with you." David smiled. Of course she was. Lisa might avoid confrontation, but she'd never back down from standing up for what was right. It's one of the reasons he loved her. Tomorrow, Prestige Auto Gallery was going to learn that you can't judge a book by its cover, and sometimes the person you dismiss might just be the one who changes everything. At exactly 10 a.m. the next morning, a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Auto Gallery. The morning sun glinted off its perfect paint job, making it look like something out of a movie. Behind it came 2 more luxury vehicles, a Mercedes S-Class and a BMW 7 Series. Inside the showroom, Brandon was showing a couple around a red sports car when he noticed the commotion outside. Todd stopped mid-conversation with another customer and stared out the window. Other salespeople drifted toward the glass, watching. The Rolls-Royce alone was worth more than most of the cars they had on the lot. Someone important was here. The driver's door opened first, and a tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stepped out. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his confident posture to his expensive watch catching the light. The other vehicles emptied too. A professional-looking woman with a briefcase, another man in a suit carrying a folder. But it was the passenger door of the Rolls-Royce that made Brandon's stomach drop. Lisa stepped out, wearing the exact same jeans and sweater from yesterday. Her comfortable sneakers touched the pavement, and she stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. The man in the suit, her husband David, walked around and took her hand. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," Lisa said, squeezing his hand. "Let's do this." They walked toward the entrance, and Brandon felt panic rising in his chest. He recognized her immediately. The woman he'd kicked out yesterday. The woman he'd assumed couldn't afford a $20 oil change, let alone a luxury vehicle. "Oh no," he whispered. No. Todd had gone pale. "Is that from yesterday?" The automatic doors slid open and David walked in first, Lisa right beside him. The showroom went quiet. Even the classical music seemed to fade into the background. Robert Fletcher, the owner, had been in his office upstairs. His secretary had called him the moment she saw the Rolls-Royce pull up. He came down now, straightening his tie, trying to figure out who these VIPs were and why they'd come to his dealership. "Good morning," Robert said, approaching with his best smile. "Welcome to Prestige Auto Gallery. I'm Robert Fletcher, the owner. How can we help you today?" David looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm David Chen, CEO of Chen Industries. This is my wife, Lisa." Recognition flashed across Robert's face. Everyone in the business world knew Chen Industries. The tech company had revolutionized 3 different industries and was worth billions. David Chen was known as a genius, a self-made success story, and notoriously private about his personal life. "Mr. Chen, it's an honor," Robert stammered. "I had no idea you were coming. If you'd called ahead, I would have—" "My wife was here yesterday," David said calmly. "She came in looking to buy a car. Something reliable, good gas mileage, simple needs. Do you remember that, Mr. Fletcher? Robert's smile faltered. I wasn't here yesterday. No, you weren't. But your employees were. David gestured toward Brandon and Todd, who looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. These two gentlemen helped my wife. Or rather, they didn't help her. They judged her, dismissed her, and physically escorted her out of your dealership. The color drained from Robert's face. He looked at Brandon and Todd, then back at Lisa. There must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Lisa said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She'd barely slept last night, anxious about coming back here. But standing next to David, she found her courage. I walked in dressed exactly like this. Your salesman took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth their time. They questioned my credit, my budget, my intelligence. When I asked for a test drive, they refused. When I asked to speak to a manager, they told me to leave. Other customers in the showroom had stopped what they were doing. Phones were coming out. People were recording. Brandon stepped forward, his face red. Ma'am, I apologize. There was a misunderstanding about our policies. What policy? David asked. The policy where you judge customers based on their clothes. Where you assume someone in jeans can't afford your cars. Where you make women feel small and unwelcome. We don't have a policy like that, Robert said quickly. This was clearly a mistake by individual employees, and I assure you, Mr. Fletcher, the woman with the briefcase spoke up. She was David's attorney, Catherine Morris. We've documented 7 similar complaints against your dealership in the past year. Would you like me to read them aloud? Robert's mouth opened and closed. I don't think that's necessary. I do, Lisa said. She turned to Catherine. Please, Catherine opened her folder. Customer 1, Hispanic woman, casually dressed, ignored for 30 minutes before being told the cars were probably out of her price range. Customer 2, elderly Asian man with an accent, repeatedly asked if he understood English while inquiring about a sedan. Customer 3, young black woman in scrubs assumed to be a nurse's aide rather than a surgeon, told she should look at used cars instead. The showroom had gone deadly silent. Every word Catherine spoke landed like a hammer. Customer 4, single mother with 2 children, asked to leave because the kids were too loud, even though they were quietly sitting in the waiting area. Customer 5, stop, Robert said. Please stop, but Catherine continued. Customer 5, woman in a wheelchair, told that test drives would be too complicated for someone with her disability. Customer 6, man with tattoos and casual clothes, followed by security through the entire showroom. Customer 7, older woman shopping alone, repeatedly told she should bring her husband to help her decide. By now, several people in the showroom were shaking their heads. A few customers had actually walked out, disgusted. The salespeople stood frozen, knowing they were witnessing something that would change everything. These complaints were filed with the Better Business Bureau, on review sites and in private communications, Catherine said. 2 of them resulted in lawsuits that you settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. This isn't about my client's wife. This is about a pattern of discrimination that your business has been practicing for years. Todd finally spoke up, his voice shaking. Mr. Fletcher, we were just trying to qualify serious buyers. We have sales targets, and we can't waste time on people who aren't really going to purchase. Waste time. Lisa interrupted, her voice rising slightly. I was a serious buyer. I had money to spend. I was ready to purchase that day. But you never asked me a single question about what I needed or wanted. You just looked at my clothes and decided I didn't belong here. David put his hand on Lisa's shoulder, a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone. She took a breath and continued, calmer now. Do you know what I do with my time? Lisa asked Brandon and Todd directly. I run a literacy program for underprivileged kids. I volunteer at a homeless shelter every Thursday. I sit on the board of 3 charitable foundations. I help families who can't afford school supplies for their children. And yes, I could buy this entire dealership without checking my bank balance. But that's not the point. She walked closer to them. And both men actually took a step back. The point is that the single mother you turned away might have been saving for months to afford a reliable car to get to work. The young woman in scrubs just finished a 12-hour shift saving lives and wanted to treat herself. The elderly man with an accent built a business with his bare hands and earned every dollar he spent. Those people deserved your respect, and you gave them nothing but judgment. Brandon looked down at his shoes. Todd stared at the wall. The other salespeople in the showroom shifted uncomfortably. David spoke again, addressing Robert. Mr. Fletcher, we didn't come here for apologies or free cars or special treatment. We came here because this needed to be said. Because discrimination, no matter how subtle, is unacceptable. You've built a culture in this dealership where employees feel entitled to decide who deserves service based on appearance. That's not just bad business. It's morally wrong. I understand, Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I take full responsibility. This will be addressed immediately. How? Lisa asked. What exactly will change? Robert looked around at his employees, at the customers watching, at the phones recording everything. He realized that this moment would define his business going forward. Either he'd be known as the dealership that discriminated, or he'd become an example of how to fix a broken system. Effective immediately, Robert said loudly, addressing the whole showroom. Brandon and Todd are no longer employed here. Their actions were unacceptable and do not represent what this dealership stands for. Brandon's head snapped up. You're firing us? I'm firing you, Robert confirmed, and will be implementing mandatory training for all staff on customer service and anti-discrimination policies. Every customer who walks through that door deserves respect, regardless of how they look, what they drive, or what they're wearing. He turned back to Lisa. Mrs. Chen, I am deeply sorry for how you were treated. There's no excuse. I failed as an owner to create a culture of respect and inclusivity. That changes today. Lisa looked at David, then back at Robert. I appreciate that, but I hope you understand this isn't just about me. There are people who experience this kind of treatment every day, in businesses everywhere. They don't have a CEO husband to stand up for them. They just absorb the hurt and move on. Those are the people I'm speaking for today. The woman who'd been standing near the sports car, the one who'd been there yesterday and watched Lisa get kicked out, suddenly spoke up. She's right. I watched what happened yesterday and I didn't say anything. I should have. I'm sorry. Another customer nodded. I've been shopping here for years. I had no idea this was happening. David's security chief, Michael, who'd been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. Mr. Fletcher will be monitoring your business's reviews and practices going forward. If this pattern continues, there will be consequences beyond bad publicity. It was a clear message. David Chen was a powerful man with powerful resources, and he wasn't going to let this go quietly. Robert nodded, understanding completely. It won't continue. You have my word. Lisa took one last look around the showroom, at the salespeople who were avoiding eye contact, at the customers who were watching with new awareness, at Brandon and Todd who'd learned the hardest lesson of their careers. I hope you mean that, she said to Robert. Then she turned to David. I'm ready to go. They walked out together, back to the Rolls-Royce waiting in the parking lot. As they drove away, Lisa looked back at the dealership one more time. Do you think anything will really change? She asked. David reached over and squeezed her hand. I think we started something. Whether it finishes depends on them. But at least now everyone knows what happened. That's more than most people get. By noon that same day, the video had already gone viral. Someone in the dealership had recorded the whole confrontation and posted it online with the caption, Billionaire's wife kicked out of dealership for wearing jeans. Comes back the next day in a Rolls-Royce. Within hours, it had 500,000 views. By evening, it was trending on 3 different platforms. News outlets picked it up. Business channels ran segments about it. The hashtag PrestigeAutogate started spreading across the internet. Lisa sat in their home office, scrolling through her phone with a mixture of fascination and anxiety. She'd never wanted attention. She'd spent years carefully maintaining her privacy, living a quiet life away from the spotlight that followed David's business success. And now suddenly her face was everywhere. Maybe we shouldn't have gone back, she said, looking up as David entered with 2 cups of tea. Having second thoughts. He handed her a cup and sat beside her. I don't know. Look at this. She showed him her phone, where comment after comment rolled in. Most were supportive, but some were harsh. People are calling me entitled, saying I only did this because I'm rich. That regular people who get treated badly don't get justice like this. David read through a few comments. They're not entirely wrong. Lisa looked at him surprised. What? You did get justice because of who I am. Because I have resources and influence. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? It shouldn't take a billionaire husband to make people treat you with basic respect. Before Lisa could respond, her phone started ringing. Unknown number. She almost declined it, but something made her answer. "Hello, Mrs. Chen? This is Jennifer Lopez. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I was hoping you'd be willing to do an interview about what happened at Prestige Auto Gallery." "I don't think so," Lisa said. "Thank you, but no. I understand your reluctance. But this story is bigger than one dealership. People are talking about discrimination in retail spaces, about how businesses treat customers differently based on appearance. Your voice could really make a difference," Lisa hesitated. "Let me think about it." 3 more reporters called in the next hour. Then 5 more. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Meanwhile, David's office was fielding calls from business journalists wanting his perspective. The story had taken on a life of its own. That evening, Lisa's best friend Rachel came over. They'd known each other since college, back when Lisa and David were struggling students with more dreams than money. Rachel was a social worker, someone who dealt with inequality and discrimination every day in her job. "I saw the video," Rachel said, sitting across from Lisa at the kitchen table. "The whole internet saw the video. How are you holding up?" "I feel weird about it," Lisa admitted. "Like, yes, what happened was wrong. But people are treating me like some kind of hero, and I'm not. I just got angry about being disrespected." "That's exactly what makes it resonate," Rachel said. "You're not a professional activist. You're just a regular person who got treated badly and spoke up about it. People connect with that. But I'm not a regular person. That's what the comments keep saying. I'm married to a billionaire. I showed up in a Rolls Royce. How is that relatable?" Rachel leaned forward. "Because the hurt on your face in that video was real. Because everyone who's ever been judged for their appearance, their age, their gender, their accent, their disability, they saw themselves in your story. Yeah, you have resources they don't. But the pain of being dismissed and looked down on, that's universal." Lisa wrapped her hands around her teacup. "So what do I do? Everyone wants me to make statements, do interviews, turn this into some big campaign. But I never asked for any of this." "No," Rachel agreed. "But maybe you got it for a reason. Lisa, I work with women every day who get treated like they're invisible, single moms who get ignored in stores, elderly women whose opinions are dismissed, young women who aren't taken seriously in professional settings. They don't have someone to stand up for them. You do have a platform now, whether you wanted it or not. The question is, what will you do with it?" Later that night, Lisa lay awake thinking about Rachel's words. She thought about all the times in her own life when she'd been overlooked or underestimated. She thought about the other customers who'd complained about Prestige Auto Gallery and been paid off to stay quiet. She thought about the comments from women online sharing their own stories of discrimination. By morning, she'd made a decision. "I want to do the interview," she told David over breakfast. "But on my terms. I want to talk about the bigger issue, not just what happened to me." David smiled. "I think that's exactly the right approach." 3 days later, Lisa sat in a television studio across from Jennifer Lopez, the reporter who'd first called her. The interview would air that evening on the national news. "Mrs. Chen, thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Jennifer began. "Let's start with what happened that day at Prestige Auto Gallery." Lisa took a breath. "I walked into a car dealership wearing comfortable clothes, and I was judged before I even opened my mouth. I was dismissed, questioned, and ultimately asked to leave. It hurt. Not because I couldn't go buy a car somewhere else, but because in that moment I felt like I didn't matter." "Your husband's response was quite dramatic," Jennifer said carefully. "Some people are saying it was over the top, showing up in a Rolls Royce." "I understand that perspective," Lisa nodded. "And honestly, that was David's decision, not mine. But here's what people need to understand. This wasn't about flexing wealth or getting revenge. It was about making a point that you can't judge someone's value based on their appearance. You've received both support and criticism online. How do you respond to people who say this only became an issue because of your husband's wealth and influence?" "They're absolutely right," Lisa said, and Jennifer looked surprised by the admission. "That's exactly the problem. I got justice because I have resources. But what about the single mother who was treated the same way at that dealership? What about the elderly man with an accent? The young woman in scrubs? They experienced the same discrimination, but nobody showed up the next day to defend them. That's what needs to change." Jennifer leaned forward. "So what are you hoping comes from this?" "Awareness first. People need to recognize that this happens all the time in all kinds of businesses. Retail stores, restaurants, banks, car dealerships. Employees are trained, consciously or unconsciously, to profile customers based on appearance. And that needs to stop. You've been quiet about your personal life for years. Why speak out now? Lisa paused, choosing her words carefully, because staying quiet felt wrong. I have a platform, like it or not. If I can use that to shine a light on an issue that affects millions of people, then maybe something good can come from a bad experience. The interview aired that evening and reached 12 million viewers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The next morning, Lisa's email inbox was flooded. But they weren't just from reporters anymore. They were from regular people sharing their own stories. A woman in Texas wrote about being followed around a jewelry store because of her tattoos, even though she was there to buy an engagement ring with cash she'd saved for months. A man from Ohio described being questioned about shoplifting in a grocery store, simply because he was black and wearing a hoodie, even though he was a software engineer who'd stopped in after work. An elderly woman from Florida shared how car salesmen always directed questions to her adult son instead of her, even though she was the one buying the car with her own money. Story after story poured in. Lisa read them all, feeling the weight of each one. There are so many, she told David that evening, her laptop open on the couch between them. I had no idea it was this widespread. People finally feel like someone's listening, David said. You gave them permission to talk about it. A week after the interview, Lisa received a call from the head of a consumer advocacy organization. They wanted her help developing a campaign to address discrimination in retail and service industries. I'm not an activist, Lisa said. I wouldn't even know where to start. You already started, the woman on the phone replied. You spoke truth to power. You made people pay attention. That's the hardest part. The rest we can figure out together. Meanwhile, Prestige Auto Gallery was experiencing its own aftermath. Robert Fletcher had kept his word about firing Brandon and Todd, and he'd implemented the training program he'd promised. But the damage to his reputation was severe. Sales dropped 30% in 2 weeks. Several longtime customers took their business elsewhere. The local business community was divided. Some praised Robert for taking immediate action. Others whispered that he was only reacting because he got caught, that he must have known about the culture in his dealership all along. 2 other employees quit, saying they couldn't work somewhere with that kind of publicity. But 3 new people applied specifically because they'd heard about the changes Robert was making, and they wanted to be part of a business that was trying to do better. Robert himself couldn't sleep well anymore. He kept replaying that day in his mind. The look on Lisa's face, the comments his employees had made, how many other customers had been treated that way, how many had left quietly without complaining and he'd never known. He decided to take an unusual step. He published an open letter on the dealership's website and in the local newspaper. To our community, it began. Prestige Auto Gallery failed. We failed Mrs. Chen, and we failed many others before her. We created an environment where employees felt entitled to judge customers based on appearance rather than character. This was wrong, and I take full responsibility as the owner. We are changing, not because we got caught, but because it's the right thing to do. We've implemented new training, new policies, and a new culture. Every customer who walks through our doors deserves respect and quality service, regardless of how they look, what they drive, or what they're wearing. To those we've hurt, I am truly sorry. We cannot undo the past, but we can commit to a better future, and to our community. Hold us accountable. If we fail to live up to these standards, speak up. We're listening now. Lisa read the letter and felt something unexpected. Hope. Maybe this really could lead to change. Not just at one dealership, but across an entire industry. She called the consumer advocacy organization back. Okay, she said. Let's talk about that campaign. 3 months after the incident at Prestige Auto Gallery, Lisa stood in front of a room full of retail managers, business owners, and customer service trainers. She'd never imagined herself as a public speaker, but here she was, about to address 200 people at a conference on customer service excellence. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the microphone. David sat in the front row, giving her an encouraging smile. Rachel was there too, along with representatives from 6 different consumer advocacy groups. Good morning, Lisa began, her voice steadier than she felt. 3 months ago, I was kicked out of a car dealership for wearing jeans. Today, I'm not here to talk about revenge or punishment. I'm here to talk about change. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. It showed a simple question. What does a customer look like? When your employees see someone walk through your door, what assumptions do they make? About income, education, decision-making authority, creditworthiness. We all make snap judgments. It's human nature. But in business, those judgments become discrimination, and discrimination drives customers away. Over the next 40 minutes, Lisa shared data her team had collected. Stories from thousands of people who'd experienced discrimination in retail settings. Statistics showing how businesses lost revenue when employees profiled customers. Case studies of companies that had successfully reformed their practices. But the most powerful part came when she invited 3 people onto the stage with her. First was a woman named Keisha, a surgeon who'd been treated dismissively at a car dealership because she'd come in wearing scrubs. They assumed I was a nurse's aide, Keisha said. They talked down to me, questioned whether I could afford the car I wanted. I ended up buying a BMW from a competitor and told everyone I knew about my experience. That dealership lost not just my business, but dozens of referrals. Next was Tom, a military veteran with visible tattoos and a casual style. I've been followed in stores. Security guards watch me like I'm going to steal something. I've had people assume I'm unemployed or dangerous. I own 3 successful restaurants. But people see the tattoos and make up their minds about who I am. Finally, there was Helen, a 78-year-old woman who'd been patronized and ignored in financial services settings. Bankers would talk to my son instead of me, even though it was my money. Car salesmen would suggest I bring my husband, even though I'd been widowed for 10 years. I'm not incompetent because I'm old. I'm experienced, knowledgeable, and I deserve respect. The room was silent as these 3 shared their stories. Lisa saw people wiping their eyes, nodding in recognition. These aren't isolated incidents, Lisa continued. This is a systemic issue that costs businesses billions of dollars a year in lost sales and damaged reputations. But more importantly, it costs human beings their dignity. After the presentation, dozens of business owners approached Lisa. Some wanted to apologize for their own practices. Others wanted to know how to implement better training. A few were defensive, insisting their businesses would never discriminate. One retail chain executive pulled Lisa aside. "We want to work with you," she said. "Help us audit our customer service practices. Train our staff. We're serious about getting this right." This was followed by similar offers from 3 other companies. Lisa found herself accidentally launching a consulting practice focused on inclusive customer service. "I can't do this alone," she told David that night. "I'm not qualified. I'm not a business consultant or a diversity expert." "No," David agreed, "but you're authentic and you've lived this. Partner with people who have the expertise. Build a team. Make this bigger than just you." So that's what she did. Lisa partnered with Rachel, whose social work background brought valuable perspective. She brought on a former retail executive who'd spent years studying customer behavior. She hired a diversity and inclusion trainer. Together, they created a comprehensive program called Service Without Judgment. The program taught employees to recognize their own biases, to treat every customer as potentially their most important sale, and to value human dignity over perceived profit. It included role-playing exercises, real scenarios, and accountability measures. Within 6 months, 15 major retailers had signed up for the program. The results were striking. Companies reported increased sales, better customer reviews, and improved employee satisfaction. When staff felt empowered to serve everyone well, their job satisfaction went up. But Lisa's proudest moment came from an unexpected source. She received a letter in the mail, handwritten on simple notebook paper. The return address was from across the country. When she opened it, she recognized the name immediately. Brandon, one of the salesmen who'd kicked her out of Prestige Auto Gallery. "Mrs. Chen," the letter began, "you don't know me, but I'm the person who treated you terribly that day at the dealership. I've thought about it every day since. Not because I lost my job, but because I realized how wrong I was about everything. After I was fired, I was angry. I blamed you for ruining my life. But then I started really thinking about why I acted that way. I'd been trained to qualify customers quickly, to maximize my time with serious buyers. But somewhere along the way, I'd started judging people based on their clothes, their car, their appearance. I'd forgotten that every person who walks through a door is a human being who deserves respect. I'm working now at a nonprofit that helps people with barriers to employment find jobs, formerly incarcerated people, People with disabilities, people experiencing homelessness. I see every day how they get judged and dismissed based on circumstances beyond their control. And I realize I was doing the same thing. I can't undo what I did to you or to the other customers I treated poorly, but I can do better going forward. Thank you for teaching me the hardest and most important lesson of my life. You could have just gotten me fired and walked away. Instead, you started a conversation about human dignity that changed my entire perspective. I'm sorry, and I'm grateful. Lisa read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was what she'd hoped for. Not revenge, not punishment, but understanding, growth, change. She wrote back to Brandon, thanking him for his letter and his honesty. She told him about her work and encouraged him to keep learning and growing. She even connected him with her nonprofit network, helping him find additional resources for his job. That's the whole point, she explained to David. It's not about destroying people who make mistakes. It's about helping them become better. Meanwhile, Prestige Auto Gallery had become an unexpected success story. After the initial drop in sales, business started recovering. Robert Fletcher's commitment to change had been genuine, and customers noticed. He'd hired a diverse staff, implemented Lisa's training program, and created a culture of respect. 6 months after the incident, the dealership's sales were up 20% from the previous year. Customer satisfaction scores had improved dramatically, and Robert had become a speaker himself, sharing his story with other business owners about the importance of inclusive service. I was failing before and didn't even know it, he told an industry conference. I thought my business was successful because we had decent sales numbers, but we were leaving money on the table and hurting people in the process. Making changes wasn't just the right thing to do morally. It was the right thing to do for business. One evening, Lisa received an invitation to speak at a congressional hearing about consumer discrimination. Lawmakers were considering legislation that would require anti-discrimination training for businesses receiving certain federal contracts. This is getting bigger than I ever imagined, Lisa said, staring at the invitation. That's because it matters, David replied. You tapped into something people have been feeling for years but didn't have words for. You gave them a voice. At the hearing, Lisa spoke alongside consumer advocates, civil rights lawyers, and business ethics professors. She shared her story, but she also emphasized the stories of thousands of others who'd reached out to her. This isn't about my experience at one dealership, she told the committee. This is about creating a culture where every person, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstances, is treated with dignity in commercial settings. It's about training employees to see humans instead of dollar signs. It's about accountability and change. The legislation passed 8 months later. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Businesses that wanted federal contracts would need to demonstrate commitment to inclusive customer service practices. A year after being kicked out of Prestige Auto Gallery, Lisa sat in her home office responding to emails. Her consulting work had grown beyond anything she'd expected. Major corporations wanted her guidance. Small businesses reached out for advice. College marketing programs invited her to speak.